Oh, hello. My name is Mara, and welcome to Books Like Whoa. Okay, so this is the first and what I think is going to become a running series on my channel of reviews, because I do want to be intentional about keeping reviews in the mix, and since Mission Marple is going to be winding down here in the next couple of months, I do like having sort of a regular reviewing feature, and I thought that I would stick with mysteries. Now, I am somewhat inspired here by Books and Lala, because she does something called 3 thriller reviews, where she basically just reviews the last 3 thrillers that she read and kind of gives a mini review for each of them. This is going to be a little bit more focused than that, and I mean, plenty of people, let's be clear, plenty of people have like grouped reviews, but I like the regularity with which that feature comes out. And I think I found that the idea of picking 3 books is a nice amount in terms of it's like a little more meaty than just the one book. And for mysteries, unless you're going to get into full spoilers, I think sometimes it's tricky to have a full review of just the one book. So what I'm going to be doing is reviewing for you guys what I call isolated closed circle mysteries. What I mean by this is that my favorite trope in mysteries are where everybody is stuck somewhere together, people start dying, and they have to figure out who done it, like within the group of them that are stuck there together. The quintessential version of this story is And Then There Were None. A couple of other Agatha Christie's that definitely follow this pattern as well are Murder on the Orient Express and Death on the Nile. So that is the vibe of what I'm looking for. I either want there to be a detective who happens to be there and therefore is sleuthing, or no outside police force. What keeps them there sometimes is like the weather, sometimes they're on an island, sometimes there's an apocalypse. Maybe that's what's happened in this one of the ones we're going to talk about today. Something is keeping them trapped all together. Mysteries that are similar but are not quite this are like a locked room mystery often has some of these components, as well as like a country house mystery often has some of these components, or sort of like in a rural community, but they're not totally that like claustrophobic feeling, and that's really what I love in this kind of sub trope. So anyway, I've been doing, like, I've read several of these, or like a lot of these throughout the year, and anytime I encounter it, it makes me excited. But a lot of the ones I read were sort of in my pre-record keeping days. So I've been trying to dig in and find lists of this type of book, and it's a little hard to put in the right search terms to get what you're looking for. Like sometimes I'll search books like And Then There Were None, or books like Clue. The movie Clue is a great example of what I'm talking about in terms of an isolated closed circle mystery. But what I'm going to start doing is reviewing for you guys some of the ones that I have encountered in my travels, and I'm going to group them by themes. So the first installment, because it is June and because a lot of people, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, are having breaks right now, we're going to have hotel-related ones to scare the crap out of you for when you're staying in a hotel. I've got 3 recommendations or 3 reviews of books about everybody being trapped in a hotel or inn, and people start dying. So that's going to be this go-round. So we're going to talk about 3 that fit this trope. That is Sleep by C.L. Taylor, An Unwanted Guest by Shari, Lapena, and The Last by Hanna, Jameson. So like I said, all of these are isolated closed circle mysteries, and they all take place in a hotel. So this is not like some of the ones that you read, or often what is happening is people stuck in like a kind of isolated cabin or country house or whatever. These are all strangers, at least ostensibly, who are stuck in a hotel together, though there's a lot of differences between these. So this one is set in Scotland. This one, if I'm remembering rightly, is set in like upstate New York, and this one is set in Switzerland. This one, you have like some buildup before you get to everybody being in this Scottish inn, but then after that they get reined in. Basically there's a gigantic storm. They're on an island with a ferry. Nobody can leave. They're like flooded in. This one takes place in the middle of a snowstorm, so that is what is keeping them all trapped together. And this one happens after the apocalypse, where a nuclear bomb has gone off, and this isolated Swiss hotel is one of the only places in kind of the civilized world that has not been like hugely impacted. And then we also have kind of a difference in terms of point of view, or like perspective. So in this one, we have a few different point of view characters, but the main person's head who we are in at the inn is a receptionist who has taken a job there. She's kind of our main character. In an Unwanted Guest, it really is more of like an ensemble piece. So we have, you know, a bunch of different perspectives. And then in the last, we have one of the guests who is at the Swiss Hotel for a conference, and he is definitely our main character for that one. So definitely some overlaps, definitely some differences. None of these are bad. All of these I'll just go ahead and tell you I would recommend. I am going to do my best not to spoil anything. If I decide I'm going to do any spoilers, I will wait till the very end and I'll have something on the screen letting you know that that's what's happening. But yeah, let's dive into each of these and I'll kind of tell you what I think of them as a book and what I think of them in the context of this specific trope that I really love. Okay, in terms of the one that I read most recently, that would be Sleep by C.L. Taylor. I had not heard of this until I was in London and I saw this very prominently displayed in the bookstore in the airport, and when it said 7 guests, 7 secrets, 1 killer, do you dare, and it had like an isolated structure, I was like, I bet this is going to be what I'm looking for. And I'm really glad I have not seen this listed in any of sort of my search terms. So I was really glad that I happened upon this one. I will tell you just really quickly, I have found that this trope is much more common in the British mystery tradition than it is in the American one. And I don't totally know why. It may just be that I haven't found enough in the American, but like a lot of the ones that I've been finding are written by at least somebody in the Commonwealth, usually a Brit, but sometimes like an Aussie or a Kiwi, but like there seems to be much more in that tradition and interest in this trope. So it was easy when I was in England to find more of these than it typically is if I just happen to browse in a random US bookstore. So anyway, this one I think is really good, and it's the rare situation where I think that it's a mystery that ends much more strongly than it begins. A lot of times in mysteries, I find that the setup is really good, but then once you get into the actual like meat of things, it starts to let you down a little bit. This is kind of the opposite because this is, let's say this is roughly 350 pages. The first third of this is kind of weak, and I honestly think probably should have been cut or like significantly reduced. Basically, it takes far too long for you to get to the actual inn where, you know, people start dying. But the setup is that the receptionist at this inn that we ultimately end up at, she was a marketing executive. She is in a terrible car crash where she was the one driving, but basically like a big like lorry or truck driver fell asleep and hit her car. 2 of her colleagues that were in the car with her die, and one of them is like critically injured. He's ultimately like paralyzed, and she is the only one who walks away kind of scot-free, at least ostensibly, but she's got tremendous PTSD from this. She has a real trouble sleeping, and she quickly begins to think that somebody's kind of stalking her and like wants to punish her for what happened. So that's what we spend the first third of the book kind of getting set up. And she ultimately decides that she wants to leave London and go to this tiny island that has like 30 people on it and be a receptionist or sort of like general person at this inn. And like in her first couple of weeks, a whole group of people come who are going to go on a walking tour, and there's a huge storm that's like cutting them off from the little village that's on this island and definitely cutting them off from the mainland, and like people start dying, and she's pretty sure it's the person who has been stalking her since the beginning. So once this gets into that part of the book, like the actual closed circle bit, it's really good. And I actually really love the kind of way that the author incorporates the idea of sleep and uses that sort of as a leitmotif in this. I thought that was really well done, actually. Kind of sleep as an allusion to death versus like rest versus actual like just sleeping. I actually really quite liked how this one ultimately went. I do, however, think that it takes a long time to get going, and it has far too many viewpoint characters. There's a lot of noise in this book. Really, I think we should have mostly just been in maybe 1 or 2 of these characters' heads, and I think it would have made it more successful. So I ultimately gave this 3.5 stars. I would recommend it. I would just tell you that it takes a while to get to what to me is kind of the main attraction of this book, which is that trope that I like so much. And I think that if that had been cut out, this would have been stronger. A general note is that I find that this type of trope does best, like at least to my taste, when it is a shorter book and where there's not a lot of preamble to getting everybody assembled to have people start dying. Like, I think that they tend to be more successful when it just sort of like cuts to the chase. So So I would just tell you that. But overall, I would recommend this, and I definitely do think that this qualifies as an isolated closed circle mystery. It is not false advertising. I think that that's exactly what this is. Next, we have The Last by Hana Jameson. This is also a relatively new release, but one that has been out here in the US, so that is where I got it. This one sold me once I realized that it basically the way it is described is being that isolated closed circle, but like with this nuclear war twist to it in terms of that being what is keeping everybody together. That I thought was like a masterstroke and kind of, I don't know if it's wholly unique, but definitely feels unusual to me as the mechanism by which people are being kept together. I really like that as a setup. That's why I'm somewhat disappointed to tell you that this is not really an isolated closed circle mystery, even though that is how it is advertised and sort of what it is masquerading as. There is a murder that they are trying to solve, but that is very much in the background. This is honestly much more of sort of like a post-apocalyptic thriller. So like, yes, there is definitely the sense of menace. There definitely is a little bit of sleuthing and whodunit-ing in the mix here, but I just think that there's not enough, and it bums me out. I still give this 4 stars. I recommend this as a book. I don't that much recommend it as an isolated closed circle trope, and I struggle to decide if I even think it really counts as that. I probably am gonna, on Goodreads, I have 2 shelves if you ever want to see the list of ones that I've read or am tracking. I think I'm probably gonna end up putting this in my almost isolated closed circle shelf because the setup is there, but that's just not where the energy of the book is at all. And so there is some sleuthing. It kind of bums me out because I think that if that had been the route that the author had taken, this would have been like an all-time favorite because the writing is really nice. I think the characters are really compelling, and I like the imagined version of what would happen after a nuclear war. Like, I thought that was thoughtfully handled, and I think this has a lot of thematic depth. Like, this is a really good book. It's just not that trope, and when that's how it's sold, I think it's just setting up a bad expectation for the reader. I also think that the resolution of what mystery elements there are in here is pretty weak. When I have talked about this before in the past, people in my comments have basically been like, I was liking it until that ending, and I'm like, that's really fair. Like, it didn't bother me as much. I should just tell you, I am pretty forgiving of endings in mysteries just because I think it is really hard to have a truly satisfying conclusion to a mystery. So as long as it's like not just preposterous or like terrible, I usually will just like ding it down a little bit, but it doesn't ruin the book for me. I do know some people in my comments were saying that the ending of this one really impacted their overall enjoyment. That was not my experience, and that's why I give it a 4-star and would still recommend. But I would just give you that caveat that if like a really strong ending to the mystery is important to you, this might let you down a little bit. Because I had kind of given up on this actually being a real mystery and was thinking of it more like a thriller, that didn't bother me so much. So anyway, I think I'm gonna move this out of my isolated closed circle shelf and put it on my almost isolated closed circle shelf because it has a lot of the elements and the kind of claustrophobia and the sort of atmospheric dread that I really like in that trope, but it just doesn't have enough of the actual mystery. So I rated this higher than this, but I think if you're looking for a true isolated closed circle, I would recommend this to you before this one. I just think that this is overall probably a better book, though it does have the opposite. Like, this one has a weak beginning and a strong end. This one has a strong beginning and a weaker end. So there you go. And then we come to An Unwanted Guest. Now this was, I think, number like 3 or 4 on my best mysteries of last year rating. So, spoilers, I really like this book a lot. I think if this wasn't written in present tense, I probably would have given this a 4.5 or a 5-star. And if the solution to the mystery was a little bit better, because this is, I think, another example where the ending is okay, but I don't think it's awesome. So like, it doesn't take away from my enjoyment of the book, but it doesn't add to it, if that makes sense. But that being said, I think that of the 3 of these, this is like really what I want from this type of mystery, which is it gets going right from the beginning. Like, it starts with all of our hotel guests converging upon this little, I think it's in New York or Vermont, somewhere, Catskills. Okay, yeah, so probably New York. They're all converging on this little inn in the middle of a snowstorm. They get there, they start making polite chit chat. We meet all of these couples and individuals who are staying there. We meet some of the hotel staff, and then lo and behold, the next morning, somebody's dead. And what it does, the thing that I really like, the pacing in this is just like, it's exactly what I want from this type of trope, because like at first they're like, was this an accident? Like, we don't know. And then slowly as the body count rises, the menace builds and they get more and more scared because they realize somebody is killing and it's not like a tragedy or whatever. Like, I just really love the pacing of this so much, and the wintry atmosphere is just really well conveyed in this. There's like this ice house thing outside of the hotel. One of the things that I really like in the version of this trope where there is a hotel is that you have this element of there's all these strangers there together, but you're never sure if they're really strangers. So like, depending on how the point of view is handled in these types of books, it could be that some of them really do know each other and know that they know each other. It could be that somebody is there under like kind of a false identity, but actually like no, like that element of it I find really satisfying in this type of isolated closed circle mystery. I think you also get that element in the version of isolated closed circle mysteries where they're stranded somewhere. So like, if there's a plane crash or they're on some version of like transportation, so like on a boat or on a whatever, like that also introduces the sort of you're all strangers, but are you really element. But the hotel version of this trope definitely has that, and I really enjoy that in these types of books. So yeah, I really, really like this book a lot. It's not perfect, but it delivers this specific trope really effectively, in my opinion. And it's definitely something I would point to as like a good example of this. Like this is one of the books I always give as an example of what I'm talking about when I'm trying to describe this trope. This is like a textbook example. So of these three that are set in a hotel, I would say that this is definitely the one I would most recommend. I would still definitely recommend these other two. Just know that this one takes a while to get going, and this one doesn't really have, it's more of a thriller than a mystery. So I think that will do it for my first 3 isolated closed circle mystery review. I'm gonna have to find a catchier name for this series, but just know that I'm gonna be having these up on my channel, these kinds of reviews every month or 2. I think next month I'm probably gonna do like a Christmas in July recommendation, because so many of these types of books take place at Christmas, because being snowed in is so often sort of like the mechanism by which everyone's being kept together. One thing that I'm hoping that in these reviews we can talk about are like what the micro tropes of these are. So like this one was hotels. I'm going to do one for Christmas. I'm definitely going to do one with different types of transportation. Like, I'm hoping we can get into some of the like nuances of kind of how the mechanics of this micro genre work. So I think that will do it for this first review. So yeah, I hope you guys liked that. Definitely let me know if there's any of these kind of micro types of isolated closed circle mysteries you're interested in me reviewing. Sooner rather than later, I can take that under advisement. And yeah, let me know maybe one of your favorite isolated closed circle mysteries set at a hotel. I'm always looking for recommendations for sure, to expand my reading list. But yeah, I think that will do it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, subscribe, follow me on the social medias if you are so inclined. I have all that information listed in the description box below. And I think that will do it. I hope you're having a super lovely day, and I will just talk to you soon. Bye!